Hello and welcome to the Enneagram 2.0 podcast. I am Uranio Pais.
And I'm Beatrice Chestnut.
And today we're going to talk about Beatrice Chestnut.
Uh-oh.
Yes, this is the time for us to have our interviewee for Type 2 who's doing the work, who's self-developing and doing the very difficult task to grow.
At least trying to.
Yes, and having, good results also. I know you be. So I'm very, very glad and honored that to be interviewing you for our listeners. And I think they will be delighted to know more about you.
Well, I think it's important to know more about Type 2. I'm actually looking forward to talking about my own type because I think there are a lot of misunderstandings people have about 2s related to the ways that 2s have been described in the Enneagram world. This is one of a series of podcasts focusing on the 9 types, each one looking at a person who is doing the inner work, and so talking more personally about themselves. And we might even get to 27 someday because we do always want to emphasize the subtypes, the 3 versions of the 9 types, based on which of one of 3 instinctual drives is most prominent. But we'll start with the 9 types and interview a person for each type, someone we know that is on an inner growth path.
Yeah, and therefore getting out of their box.
Exactly. And we have other podcasts that focus on the basic descriptions of the 9 types. And we also have one focusing on the growth paths of each type. But now you'll interview me to talk about what I've done to grow as a 2.
We want to be as personal as possible in our Enneagram 2.0 podcast so that you, our listener, can resonate, identify with. And by the way, this is not only useful if you are a 2, but also if you have 2s in your life, in your personal or professional life. Maybe you will learn how to have more compassion for 2s and also how to relate better with them.
Yes, and we hear from a lot of people that people understand the Enneagram types at a much deeper level when they hear an individual person telling their own story.
Yes. So, B, why don't you start by sharing with us a short summary of who 2s are in personality before developing?
Well, I think when we're in personality, 2s focus a lot on other people, on relationships, on whether or not other people like them, reading others to see how they feel about them, and then often going into action to do things for others in order to make them like them or achieve a good rapport with others. I like to point out that I think there are some misconceptions about 2s based on the way they've been described in the Enneagram world. I think, and this is my personal view, but I am a 2, so hopefully I have some authority to speak about this. I think that 2s have been described too much in terms of giving and helping and looking for people with needs that they can meet.
I love when you explain this. Can you elaborate on this?
Yes, I don't think 2s are just about helping and giving in a simplistic way. First of all, for me, it's not really, I'm not looking for people to help. I'm not looking for needs out there in the world to be met. Mostly, I'm looking for people to like me. I'm looking for people to approve of what I do. I want to know that other people have good feelings about me. And if they don't, then I will try to influence the way they feel about me. Now, one of the ways that I might influence someone to have positive feelings about me is to be supportive, or to help them with something, or to give them something. But that's not the main point. The main point is that the helping or giving or supporting is a means to an end, and the end is to be liked. And if I feel like someone already likes me, I might not necessarily help them. And so it's a little bit like the people who are more of a challenge, either the important people in our world or the people who don't yet like us, or when we're not sure, maybe there's someone who likes us, but maybe they might be a little bit mad at us. It's the bridge to cross. It's the challenging person that you focus on a lot in terms of trying to shift how they feel about you in a positive direction.
Thank you for explaining us all this. And also, do you think that the most common approaches to choose forget to mention that the giving is not so free as they talk about, and it's not as altruistic as we idealize?
Yes, I'm glad that you mentioned that. That was my next point, is that the helping is also not simple or uncomplicated, because often there is something behind it. And sometimes twos are aware of this, but very often they aren't. Many twos can believe, I just want to make your life better. I just want to contribute to the common good. I just want to be altruistic in being of service. And let me say, some of the time I think that is true for twos, but a lot of the time, especially when twos are in ego, when they haven't done the inner work to rise above their personality tendencies and their ego needs, they tend to give strategically. And this is very important to understand, that it's a strategy. It's sometimes or often giving to get something back. So I give to you, and sometimes it's just to get your approval, or to make sure that you like me, or, like I said, to influence how you feel about me. But when I'm giving to you, I either want your approval, or I want you to like me, I want to create a positive impression, or maybe I want you to meet a need of mine that I don't want to really express directly.
Because?
Well, twos often had a history in early life of not having their needs met. And when that happens, it becomes a source of pain to even look at your needs or even be aware of them, because it returns you right back to that experience of needing something and having no one there for you, or having people not see you, not recognize what you need. And when that happens, we often have an unconscious sense that there's something wrong with us, or something wrong with our needs. Maybe we're too needy, we're too much for people. And so we don't want to be a burden. So at an unconscious level, there's a way that we lose touch with an awareness of what our needs even are. And then when we are aware of our needs, it's really hard for us to speak to them directly. It's really hard to ask for help, because there's like this unconscious assumption that we will be denied, that someone will say no, that we will be rejected. And rejection is something that twos avoid at all costs.
Yes. And of course, there is also the intrinsic emotional pattern or vice of pride behind that, right?
Right. And I think a lot of people, twos included, don't really understand what pride is.
So teach us.
So pride is the passion of type 2. And as we say, one of the things that's very interesting about the Enneagram is each of the types has this central emotional motivation that's very often mostly unconscious. It's one of the 7 deadly sins in the Christian tradition, plus fear and deceit. And for twos, it's pride. And this isn't pride as in, like, I feel proud of my child, or I'm proud of an accomplishment. It's pride in the more in a more difficult sense. And it's the pride of, if I can be just blunt, it's the pride of Satan. It's the pride of the mythic, in the myth of the Bible. In the Christian tradition, it's the angel, the fallen angel. Because what was the sin of Satan? It was saying I in front of the only one. So it's making ourselves excessively important, needing to be more important than we actually are, needing to have a puffed up, elevated sense of ourselves so that we can get the love or respect or appreciation from others.
So when you talked about not asking for help, pride behind that is, I am above you and I don't need as much help as you do.
Right, but it's
very unconscious.
Exactly. We need to say very quickly that many twos who are listening, if you're a two and listening to this, you may not relate to that. And I didn't relate to that when I first learned the Enneagram either.
How do you think you would have reacted to your own description of twos when you were a teenager or a young adult?
So I would say maybe 20s. And when
Yes.
I learned the Enneagram
Yes.
in my 20s, and when I first learned the Enneagram, I didn't understand what pride was in the Enneagram sense that we're talking about here. I part of why I didn't understand it is because most of my life, and certainly at that time, I had more of a negative sense about myself. I had a sense of low self-esteem. I always had a sense that I was not good enough. Like I was trying to make people like me. I was trying to be a good person. I was trying to do things perfectly. And I was never quite meeting the mark. So I wanted someone to like me and they never liked me enough. Or I wanted to be attractive and I was never attractive enough, or as attractive as the next person. So I always had a sense of being less than. So I didn't really relate to the way pride gets described in the Enneagram as sort of thinking of yourself as more or more important than you are. The way I think of it is pride is inflation and deflation. It's
Right.
it's a polarity. There's a self-inflation, and I think that part is often less conscious for twos. And then there's a deflation that's sort of the polar opposite of that. So sometimes we twos unconsciously, of course, think we're more than we actually are, more important than we actually are. And sometimes we actually think we're less important than we actually are. So it goes both ways. And I think a lot of twos relate more to the deflation part. Like, I want people to like me. I want people to love me, but I have this sense that I'm unlovable. So I feel sort of this inner sense of not being good enough, not worthy enough, not perfect enough for you to see me as the person that you want or need me to be so that you can be close to me. And so there's always a sense of I have to try harder to earn your love.
So I think it's interesting to hear that, because I am a 5, and as a 5, I give up. I may have the same feelings, but I give up, and choose because of pride, and maybe because it's a bigger need that they have to be liked. They never give up, and they go an extra mile to be liked.
Yeah, it's the main coping strategy is this sense of I can make other people like me. I can influence the way people perceive me, the way they feel about me by shape-shifting, essentially. 2s and 3s on the Enneagram are both shapeshifters.
Right.
And so 2s get really good at sensing who do you want me to be, or what kind of person do you really like? And I will turn myself into that in order to create a good connection with you.
And not only into that, but into the very best ever version of that, right? Which is pride.
Right. Again, we don't think of it as pride, but this is pride acting both when we have a sense of like, I don't have needs. And again, sometimes our needs are just completely unconscious. Like if you ask a 2, what do you need right now? They'll kind of go blank often. And so it's both, I don't have needs and you do, and I'm here to take care of your needs because and again, this is the pride part that we're not very conscious of. There's this assumption that I'm superhuman, right? Because I can meet all the needs out there. I can be whoever you want me to be and whoever you need me to be and whatever you need me to be, so that I can create a good connection with everyone I might want to. And at the same time, part of that is I don't want you to be turned off to me. I don't want to be a burden to you. And so I have this sense of, well, I don't need anything from you. And this will be part of me being sort of the perfect friend or the perfect partner, because I don't need anything of you, but I'm here to take care of you. Now, again, a lot of times when 2s start working on themselves, they start getting in touch with a sense of being exhausted of taking care of other people. And we don't really want to be the caretakers, but it's our main strategy for creating this kind of positive rapport or love connection.
Yes, thank you. Seeing all this must be hard and painful.
I think it has been over the years. Now I'm a little more used to it. The higher virtue of 2s is humility. And of course, this is the opposite of pride. The virtue is always the sort of the opposing quality. And focusing on humility has helped me a lot, because what I realized humility is not thinking less of myself, but having a realistic sense of who I am and how I can impact people. So not thinking I'm more important than I actually am to other people or in the world as I walk around in the world. And also not thinking I'm less than I am, not making myself small either, which I can sometimes do as a response, I think, to pride that's often very unconscious. And we always need to remember that this is unconscious because some twos will have a hard time seeing this in themselves. And I certainly did. It took me a while to see. And sometimes I saw it in my fantasies that I'd have about myself, like a fantasy of being really important to a good friend of mine. And one of the things that needs to be said about twos is not everyone in our world is created equal, right? We may want everyone to like us, but certain people are more important than others to us.
So twos are selective.
Twos are selective. And this is a big difference between twos and nines. And twos and nines on the Enneagram can look alike. But we're very selective. And some people we put more focus on than others.
So B, let's talk even more about you and your biography as a two. So how was it for you in more personal terms when you first saw pride, but I mean really saw pride?
Well, when I first started really seeing it, how I sometimes walked around with an inflated sense of myself, it was deeply embarrassing. I was surprised because I didn't want to be seen that way, of course. And you immediately always think as a two, I immediately always think of what will other people think. I sometimes say as a two, when you're by yourself, it's one thing, but as soon as someone else walks in the room, everything changes because the focus goes to how do I need to be to connect with or for that other person. So when I started seeing pride, I saw it everywhere. I saw it in everything that I was doing in all my relationships because I always had this need to be attractive and important to other people and seen in a positive light. And sometimes I think just again, as a coping strategy, I would make the assumption that I was more important than I am because it's like it's like a way of making myself feel better in the world.
Yes. So embarrassment. How would you describe the pain of realizing you need all that to feel good with yourself? You need all that external, approval.
Well, when I first started doing therapy, right after I learned the Enneagram in my mid-20s, I learned a lot of new things about myself. One thing I learned is that I walked around, I always thought of myself as a happy person, and I actually think I am to a degree, but at that point, I realized that a lot of times I was acting happy in order to make other people feel okay. And again, I didn't realize this before, but I realized that I didn't know at all what I felt inside. I didn't know what I needed at all. A big experience for me early on was I was in a small women's group when around in late 20s, and it was led by a therapist. And one day the therapist turned to me and said, "So B, what do you need from the group today?" And I thought about it for a minute. And I realized I had no idea. It was as if I looked inside myself to find the answer to that question, and I found a void. There was nothing there. And it was
How did you feel?
It was a moment of existential anxiety, I would say.
So anxiety, embarrassment, anxiety. But I guess that later on, it turns into pain. Pain of disconnecting from self while you're too concerned with connecting with others.
I think what I ended up feeling first was a deep sense of sadness.
Yes.
A deep sense of sadness. And I think that sadness has been always there, but I hadn't been in touch with it because my attention was always going outside myself. Yeah. And this is a big thing about twos is we're other referencing, and that is that we pay attention to other people more than ourselves. And so I would be always focusing on others, and I wouldn't even realize. That's the beauty of the Enneagram. It shows us what we don't see about ourselves. I didn't even realize that my attention was never focused inside myself. And I think sometimes twos think they're self-preoccupied in a way because they may worry about what other people think of them, or they may be self-conscious and monitoring themselves, which of course I did all of that. But I think they don't realize that really it's the references outside themselves. It's like I'm looking at you as my friend to see how am I doing? Am I okay? Instead of coming from the inside and with a sense of knowing who I am.
So was it a sadness of the outer referencing? A sadness of what?
I think it was a sadness of being alienated from myself. It was a sadness of realizing I had, in a way, sold myself out. It's almost like my heart betrayed me because I would just turn into whatever someone else wanted me to be without regard to who I really am. So it was almost a sense of I was constantly abandoning myself in a way that was really hard to see.
Yeah. Thank you, B. And of course, this is a very important turning point.
Yes.
Also, right?
Yeah, because what I realized at that point too is I didn't have a sense of self. And this is what we say about twos is because they are so outer referencing, because they do shapeshift according to what their loved ones want them to be or what the people they want to love them want them to be, they often have a sense of not having a self. And I remember in my early years of therapy asking the question, like, what is a self? Like, how do you know what your self is? I mean, it was that sense of lacking this inner sense of self that I didn't even know what it was.
I love this question. I think all choose should ask it.
Yes, and what I ended up sort of coming to over time, which, was the result of some work in and of itself with my therapist, was that a self is this sort of sum total of all your feelings and your needs and your desires and your preferences. But, I was not in touch with all that at
And
that
not
point.
only the sum of who you are for others or the sum of your relationships then.
Right, because that's not really who you are, right? Like if I need to turn myself into something to get you to like me, that may or may not be who I really am. Sometimes it can be, but sometimes it's not at all.
Right.
And I remember feeling really bad when I would get negative feedback from a friend. Like I remember one time a friend saying, and this was later on when I was becoming a therapist, and I did a group process where we would give each other feedback. And I remember getting feedback from a friend that she was just giving me feedback on something that was different in us. Like she was basically saying, like, I liked to go out more. I'd like to go out and, go to parties and have fun and do more extroverted things. And that just wasn't her, and she was just, I had asked her, like, I can't remember what the question was, but for some feedback. And she said that she just wasn't like that. And I remember feeling horrible about myself, that I wasn't like the perfect friend for her or the perfect person that lined up, that aligned perfectly with her. And I would say that's a good word. It's like I'm always seeking alignment. And in order to achieve that alignment, I will shift myself to align with whoever you are.
And end up doing what you not necessarily like the most.
Well, and end up doing something that isn't me, turning myself into someone else. And again, if you turn yourself into other people for other people, you end up not knowing who your real self is.
So it seems that you now understand that there is a big price you pay when you do that.
Yes. And here's another piece of it. I think part of the pride is the illusion that we can control the way other people feel about us, about things. And so I think that's a big part of the pride that I realized, that by doing whatever I do, I can control how you see me, how you feel about me, what our connection is, instead of just allowing for an organic relationship to grow as it will. And, what I realized, of course, at a certain point, is that not everyone will like me. Now, on the one hand, that was painful, right? Because I was walking around with this prideful assumption that I could make anyone like me. If I focus my charm on you, if I really focus on, figuring out who you are and what you like and what you need, and I really turn on the charm, I can get you to like me. So one thing is I realized, I couldn't necessarily do that with everyone. Not everyone is going to like me. And that was a little bit painful, right? Because it was like, well, I thought I had this power that I don't have. I'm not really that powerful. But the second thing that was actually good news is it's actually very freeing.
Oh,
To
so there is a relief.
Yes, it was a huge relief of like, well, maybe you don't have to like me. Maybe I don't have to get you to like me, and I can still be okay.
Maybe I don't want you to like me because I don't want to be in a relationship with you.
Right. Maybe I don't want to spend my energy
Yes.
on you. And I think in my earlier years, I would spend my energy on everyone, and of course, some people are more important than others. So some people would get more of my attention and energy than others, but I would still worry about whether other people like me, and I might still do things to make other people like me. And of course, what that leads to also is feeling really bad if, say, someone is angry at you, or someone is disappointed in you, or someone doesn't like what you gave them or did for them, or doesn't appreciate you. Those things, you give people a lot of power. I gave people a lot of power over how I felt about myself.
Right.
Because it was all based on whether you respond to me in a certain way, whether you give me the feedback that I want, whether you consider me important.
Right. So it seems that while choose do all they can for the other person to like them, and they are usually successful in doing that because they are good in doing that.
Right.
Despite this, it seems that it's never enough, and they hold on to a big anxiety and fear that they will lose that all at any moment, and they need to keep doing it and doing it more. So
Yes.
any hint that the person might not be liking you as much must be terrifying.
Exactly. And you're always, and as a two, I'm always reading people, like, and I think we twos get very good at reading people, like even just the subtle, movement on your facial expression, we can tune into, and we see, ooh, there's something I did that wasn't okay. I need to realign myself, or I need to shift. And so, of course, it's devastating when you get rejected, or when someone doesn't like you enough, or even says something like, I don't want to be in relationship with you anymore.
Yes, but then there are other cases, milder cases, like the other person just wants you to be you and to not make as much effort,
Well, and of course, further on the growth path, you realize that there are some people in your life, not everyone, but some people that really do see you and really do appreciate you for being you. And sometimes those people know who you are more than you do. And so I would, when I realized I didn't know who I was, that was difficult. Like here's a good example. I had two good friends from high school on, from, age 14, 15. And I spent time with them more individually. And when I was with one of them, I would be one kind of person. And when I was with the other person, I would be someone else. And I had trouble when the three of us were together. And the three of us were friends all with each other. It was like I didn't know who to be, because I was one person with one of them and another person with another of them. So there is an anxiety, and sometimes I think when twos feel anxiety, it's a particular kind of anxiety. It's an anxiety on the one hand, because we tend to repress feelings.
Yes.
When our emotions start bubbling up, that can make us feel anxious, because we can feel out of control, or it can just feel scary to feel certain feelings in a certain way. But another piece is the anxiety of what I think of as insubstantiality. The anxiety of having a sense of, I don't have a self, or I'm not really here, or who am I, or how do I know who I am? And that can feel really disorienting if I shift to be whoever other people want me to be. I can have a sense of I don't exist almost.
So that, to me, is a hint of essence calling you back, and, a truer self wanting to manifest. But right before that, it seems to me that twos get more hurt than the average, person. And I can't help thinking, maybe it comes from my native language, Portuguese. We say that pride gets wounded or hurt more than other emotions do. Other emotions get, just open up, broken. Would you agree that there is this hurt that tends to be bigger for twos?
I know as a two, I'm very sensitive, and I'm very sensitive to being hurt. Now, I'm a self-preservation 2, so I think
Yeah.
I think all 2s are sensitive to being hurt, but I think the self-preservation 2 probably even a little bit more, because there's a sense of being a little bit childlike or young, and so I think that there's an added layer.
Also a natural sensitivity.
Yes, I think a sensitivity to others, sensitivity in the sense of being emotional. But yes, I think I'm easily hurt because, especially the people who are important to me in my life, I'm sometimes looking out for, on the one hand, I'm looking out for information in them that I'm okay, that they like me or love me. And I'm also looking for information that they don't, or that they're going to reject me. And it's a little bit like I want to get out of the way. I want to withdraw before someone can actually reject me. So, but it can be very painful to have the sense of either I didn't do the right thing for that person, or they don't like the way I am, or I'm not appealing enough for them.
Wow, I'm loving this conversation, B, and we'll go deeper, but let's first have a short break.
The Enneagram 2.0 podcast goes live every other Thursday on all main platforms. Stay tuned to learn more about yourself and others.
If you liked this podcast, visit www.cpenneagram.com for much more great Enneagram content.
Have you already subscribed for B and Yeranu's YouTube channel? Go to YouTube and search for Chestnut Pies and click on like and subscribe.
So we're back. B, I think you've been explaining difficult experiences and feelings that choose have that not many other people know about. And so non-choose, I think, benefit a lot from knowing that. Would you add any other feelings that you sometimes have that, as a chew, you don't share too easily with others?
I think another really important thing, especially emotionally, is that we twos are very afraid of intimacy. So it's a real bind, because on the one hand, what I want most as a 2 is to have a close relationship with someone who, where we really care about each other, we really love each other, we have fun together. And so when that doesn't happen, that's hard. But here's the thing, I'm also really afraid of that. Sometimes I remember in therapy in later years, I got in touch with the sense that I'm afraid of someone rejecting me, but I'm also afraid of what will happen if they don't reject me. In other words, I'm afraid that someone really will be close to me, that someone really will love me.
What could happen?
Well, I think first of all, it's hard to receive, because we're always in giving mode. We're always in putting something out there mode. To be home, to receive inside ourselves can be just something we're not familiar with, and something we don't allow, unconsciously, of course. So it's almost like the fear is, if I am who I really am, without trying to manipulate how you feel about me, will you love me? There's a sense that
It's
maybe
scary.
you won't. It's very scary. It feels a little bit like, and I think it has to do with having a sense of needs not being met early on. There's this sense of there's something wrong with me. So if I'm not sort of trying to do something to make you like me, if I'm just sitting here being me, you maybe won't, or you for sure won't.
Do you think this also has to do with the fact that actual intimacy implies the 2 people being at the same level?
I think it's being at the same level. I think it's just being real and vulnerable with the other person.
One with the other, 2 ways.
Right. And I think, and I do think that there's an element of pride of putting ourselves above others that we are really not conscious of and don't intend. Like, for instance, when I get really close to someone, I realized at one point, I self-observed that I was always thinking in terms of what I need to do for the other person. And it could be, how do I need to orient myself so that they still find me appealing, or they still like me? But it was never just to be. It was often never just being me, and letting them in could be not only okay, but great. That could lead to something even more positive. And of course, in relationship, an intimate relationship, you need two people in an equal space to be really open to receiving each other and just to be who they are. And it's always been hard to just rest in that place of trust, that if someone sees me, if I let myself be open and just as I am, it's hard to trust that that person will really see me and love me. And of course, I think being seen is a really important thing. I think it's important for all the heart types and maybe for all the types, but especially for heart types. And I think there's like a sense of, I'm going to be misunderstood. I'm not going to be seen as who I really am. And if I am seen, I won't be appreciated for who I really am. So it's almost like there's this unconscious reluctance for us to even just let that happen and just allow for the experience of being seen, being sort of other people giving to us, giving love to us or giving love to me, and being open, being at home in my true self to allow myself to take that in.
And you've been learning to do more and more of that, right?
Yes, definitely.
How does it feel?
I would say sometimes it still feels scary. Sometimes it feels really good. I think it was good to know that was what was happening, that there is that fear there, and that it doesn't make me wrong or less attractive or not a good person or not a person that people want to be in relationship with, to be fearful. I remember my therapist suggesting, in a situation where I was allowing someone to be close and I did start to feel fear, that I could just say that I was feeling afraid. And to me, that was like a really novel concept, that you could tell someone you felt vulnerable and afraid and that they would still like you after that, because as a two
I like you more when you say
Thank
that to me.
you. I appreciate that, because the false belief is that if I don't know it all, if I'm fearful, if I show some sort of vulnerability or fault, that you will stop liking me. It's like this sense of I have to be perfect for you, the perfect person for you, and I can't have any of my normal human foibles. Otherwise, it's all over,
Yeah, maybe some people will stop liking you, and maybe they are not the right people for you to have in
exactly.
your life, right?
And of course, as a therapist, that's what I would say to my clients, twos and others. I would say maybe you don't need or want that person to like you. And again, when I really got that, it was a relief, and to know that some relationships are more special than others. Some relationships will work and others won't, and that's the way it should be.
Because also deep inside, there is a secret willingness for choose to have more freedom from other people and to give other people more freedom of them, from them.
Yeah, I would say that's huge. Freedom is really big for me, which is why there was a good news part in realizing that not everyone had to like me. Of course, pride took a hit, because pride thinks I can make everyone like me and I've got that superpower. But the good side of recognizing and giving up the pride to an extent is realizing, oh my God, I have so much more of my own energy for myself. And I really crave freedom. Really crave freedom from others. There was a point early on in my therapy in the first few years where I had this image of myself as having strings tied from all parts of myself to all these other people. Like let's say 50 other people in my life. I would have a string, all these strings, and I couldn't move, because if I moved, they would be disrupted somehow. And when I realized I could, cut those strings, it was amazing. And even though, of course, when twos are in personality, we in a way want people to depend on us, right? We love the feeling of being indispensable because it makes us feel important.
And paradoxically, twos get dependent on other people depending on them.
Right, exactly. And that can be a positive feeling, because it gives you a feeling of power, right? If people depend on you and they can't do it without you, they're not going to exclude you. They're not going to forget about you. You're important somehow. But the great thing is when we do inner work, the more I did inner work, the less I wanted people to depend on me. The more I saw that as something false, something that I was just doing to make my ego feel better. But actually, when people, and I'm a therapist, and so I worked as a psychotherapist for many years. And one of the things that being a therapist did for me in a positive way is it helped me recognize that my job was not to create dependency with my clients. It wasn't actually good for them to depend on me past a certain point, that really I was trying to help them become independent of me. It was always a good feeling when someone didn't depend on me. And so, again, the freedom is the good news for twos. And when we get to the point where we don't need other people to need us and it actually feels great, even if you can give someone some support for a period of time, but then they don't need it, when you're doing inner work, you really feel a positive sense of, okay, that person doesn't need me and that's okay. And I've been really, in a process for a long time now of really sensing of what is mine to do for others and what isn't mine to do for others. What do they need to do for themselves? I also have got to a point where I wouldn't want to assume that I knew what other people needed, that I would even press them a little bit to tell me what they needed, because I wouldn't want to get in the trap of thinking I know best what you need, even better than what you need. That's pride, because really the truth is I don't. Other people know what they need much better than I do.
Although, of course, most twos can't know that in the beginning.
Right. In the beginning, before a two has done inner work, it can feel like, and let me tell you, you can be very convinced as a two that you really know what other people need more than they do even sometimes. And the thing is, we are kind of good at it. There have been times when I've brought someone something and right even before they knew they needed it. But then, of course, we generalize that to everything and it feeds the pride. And we need to give that up, because when we do, it allows other people to grow and do what they need to do for themselves. Oftentimes we can impede others' growth by infantilizing them. And I loved when I learned that word, that I was infantilizing people, because it made so much sense. And so it's like you allow other people to have their own feelings, to deal with their own stuff. And then you get, and I got as a two, my ability to take care of myself and focus more on me.
And people may also need their own suffering, because without it, they can't grow. And if you take that suffering away by helping too much, you won't be doing a real service to the person. It's a difficult concept to grasp, but I think you do.
Exactly. I would say that with my two clients, I would say, let your family members have their own feelings. Like, why do you think that your sister, your mother, your brother, your wife can't have their own feelings? Why do you have to take their suffering away, ease all their feelings? It's better to let people have their feelings.
Right. So I think that you who are listening to us right now, or listener, I hope that you are really taking in all these lessons that we're listening from Beatrice Chestnut about how, the deeper part of twos who are on a path. And even if you relate with twos, and if you're not a two. Now, B, I'm thinking of pushing you a little bit further. Would this be okay with you?
Yeah. Yes, that's fine.
Okay, so what do you think are ego patterns that are still difficult for you to break away from? Type 2 patterns.
Well, I think for twos, and for me, certainly boundaries have been an issue, like saying no to things. I've gotten much better at this, but I think at times it's still very difficult. I think I still struggle to say no. So, for instance, I know the Enneagram pretty well at this point, and I think that more than at any point in my life, I feel a legitimate sense of my own ability and power, like, say, as a therapist or as a coach or as an Enneagram teacher.
Which is sort of recent.
Yes, and I think it's realistic. Like I think
Yes.
like when I was younger and I was a therapist, of course, it takes a while to learn to be skillful as a therapist, but at a certain point I was probably doing a good job, but I always felt like I wasn't doing enough or I wasn't doing a good job. But now I often have a sense when I'm working with people that I'm really doing something positive for them, not in a prideful sense, but in a legitimate way. Now, I don't have a lot of time these days, but when someone comes to me and says, "Can you coach me? Can do some work with me?" I always want to say yes. And part of that is like legitimate, like I really truly want to help people. But part of it is pride, a sense of like, only I can do what they might need, or I want to be able to help everyone in the world. And the truth is, it doesn't have to be me. The truth is I don't have the time. And so it's really still hard for me to say no. And I'm still struggling with that in terms, and again, especially the pride of it, of being humble enough to say, you know what, if I can't, work with this person, that doesn't mean that they can't get the help they need from someone else in exactly the way they need it.
Yes, yes. And anything else that's still a little difficult to break away from?
Yes, I think I still really struggle from being sensitive to rejection. And for me, if I even get a whiff that someone might reject me, and it can be like someone not calling me back in a timely way, not answering my text in a timely way, and I'm looking at you. I can immediately feel very hypersensitive, like I'm being rejected. Someone doesn't care about me. I go to a big assumption that I'm not important to that person, and then I start having feelings about that. And so the feelings can kind of snowball, again, without even really thinking, well, maybe I'm making this up. Maybe this comes from pride in terms of needing to be more important than I actually am. And again, humility is more being just as important, like taking in the way I am important to people, but also not needing to be more important. And so I think sometimes I can get really hurt. Now, one thing I do a lot, either when I'm hurt or when I'm about to be hurt, or I think I'm about to be hurt, is I withdraw. Now, I think several other twos may do this too, but I think especially as a self-preservation two, I withdraw. It's like I'm out of here.
To me, as a 5, this is hurtful also.
Right. But of course, in that moment, I have decided, and again, this may be pride as well, I have come to a conclusion that you don't appreciate me, or you don't like me, or you don't like me enough, or you like something else in your life better than me, and that I'm not the priority, and I'm hurt. And so I have decided, on the one hand, I just need to get out of here to save myself. But also sometimes it can be a passive aggressive movement away, like I'm going to show you, or if I'm not important to you, then I'm going to remove myself
like
from your life.
Depriving the other from you.
There's a piece of that. Yeah. I would say that the most conscious thing, the first sort of knee-jerk thing is, I need to get out of here because I'm certain that I'm going to be hurt, because someone who I really want to like me or love me doesn't. And again, it gets very certain, because the coping strategy is I need to cut off this relationship. I need to get away. The feeling that I really hate most in the world is being somewhere I'm not wanted. And so having a feeling of I'm wanting something from this person that they don't want to give me is really painful. And so I can want to remove myself. And like you're saying, it can be hurtful to the other person, hurtful to you potentially at certain moments in our relationship when I've decided that. But that doesn't even enter my mind, because I've sort of already decided. And again, this is part of the pride, is sometimes I think I know how someone else is feeling, and I get really certain about it when really I don't know. And I end up being wrong. But I act based on this sense of like, I know what's happening. You don't care about me, or you're about to hurt me. And so I just need to leave the situation, because it's intolerable to experience that feeling of rejection.
And do you think you have any other next challenge in your particular case, in addition to these ones?
I think those two are very important. I would say, I think for me, again, I really like focusing on humility because I think that's the path out of many of these two challenges that I'm talking about, is not needing to be more important than I am, not seeing myself as more important or puffing myself up in any way.
And how do you think you can do that in your next moments of life?
Well, for me, a big challenge around this is also not making myself too small. Because sometimes what I do, and I have fear of pride a lot, right? So by now, after studying pride for all these many years, for a few decades, I really don't like when I get a sense of myself as being puffed up or inflated or prideful. And so now I have fear of pride. And so what happens is it's hard for me to actually own the power that I do have, that that is legitimate about me. I have a hard time negotiating being powerful or being good at something or being really confident without fearing that I'm going to slip into pride and that I'm going to be overdoing it or being too much, or others might see me as having false pride. So I would say what's still a challenge I'm still working on is owning my power and being confident about what I'm good at and what I have to offer in the world in a positive way, while still remaining humble, while still being very much every day, all the time, more in touch with humility than I am in pride.
Yeah, great. Now, looking back to your path so far, once more, what would be things that you believe helped you the most to break away from type 2 patterns?
So one thing is, and this happened pretty early on, maybe, probably 5 or 10 years into my therapy work, I realized that I needed to spend more time alone. I think that's vital for twos. I realized, for instance, I had a roommate at the time. I was in graduate school, and she was a great roommate, and we lived in a great apartment. But all of a sudden, I thought I need to live alone because it was just really hard for me to focus on myself without her there. Also, I think it's showing up more in relationships and being able to do conflict. So for a long time, I was afraid of people getting mad at me, and I was unable to feel and express anger in a constructive way. I had a fear that if I was in conflict with someone, the relationship would be over or damaged irreparably. And so I think in conscious and unconscious ways, I would avoid my own anger. I would certainly avoid being direct with people about how I felt, or if I was hurt, or if something was going wrong. And of course, when I am not direct, I make up stories, and then I think the stories are real, and then that damages the relationship more than anything else. So I think part of what I'm still trying to do, and I think this is just a recent thing, and I have to thank you a lot for this, because I think
I push your buttons.
You push my buttons, but not only that, you've given me a sense that we can disagree, we can be in conflict with each other, we can express anger to each other. You've given me the experience, and we can, and you'll still be okay with me. Like at the end of the conflict, I'm often surprised when you go back to liking me the way you did before. When you go back to, saying something nice or being a good friend, and there's no disruption. In fact, it's almost like we're a little bit stronger because we went through that and we heard each other out, and it wasn't pleasant or fun or easy, but we got to the other side, and the relationship is either still intact or even stronger than before.
The way I feel that, and it's not with you only, not only with choose, it's something I seek to have in all my relationships, is that brings the truer part of us, into to the scene. When we have a conflict that is important to have, and it's healthy. It has that healthy side of it, of us being able to bring up the truth. On us.
Yes, and I think that maybe up until recently, it was hard for me to believe that I could speak my truth and say maybe something I was upset about or something I didn't like, or bring up a way that I thought maybe we were at odds with each other, and that would be okay. And so I think I just avoided doing that all the time. And so I would withdraw from people. And that's not a recipe for a good relationship either. And so I think and this is a work in progress for sure, I'm getting better and better at just saying, here's how I feel, here's the truth, and risking that if you don't like it, or you don't like me a little bit because of it, that will lead to a good outcome. Again, not so much with you, but with other people, that if they don't like what I say, maybe they don't need to, and they don't need to like me, and we don't need to be connected, and that can be all right. But also for people who I do have a good relationship with, we can get through it, and it'll be okay. And I think sometimes it's hard to be able to create that space, and I think as a two, it brings up fear. But I've gotten much better at having trust that there'll be a good outcome if I'm just honest and direct.
Right. Now, please help our listeners here with something very objective. Can you describe a few things that people would see in you before and people see in you now that are really different? So that our listeners can tell the difference between the before and after.
I think now I'm more grounded. Like before, like if you saw me at a party, I remember I would go to parties and I would almost have an experience of losing myself. Like my energy would go all out there to everyone else, and I would even get overwhelmed. Like there's all these people here that I have to please or make like me. And I would totally not be grounded in my body, in myself, in my emotions. And now I think I'm much better at paying more attention to me, at sort of balancing, focusing on others with focusing on inside myself. Like, how am I feeling? What do I want? What do I want to get out of this experience? So I think people might experience me as more centered and grounded, more calm. I think they would experience me as less anxious about needing to do everything perfectly, or they might see me making a mistake and being okay with that, whereas before there might be more anxiety about trying to do everything the right way the first time. I think also before I would feel really bad and anxious if everyone wasn't approving of me. And so I think because of that now, I think you'll see me expressing more controversial opinions, stronger opinions. It used to be I would sugarcoat everything. Like for instance, if someone said they really liked a particular movie, inside my head, I would think, wow, I didn't like that movie, but I would never say that. I would never, I would just go, oh yeah, I like that movie too. I might lie a little bit. And I think as a two, I would tell a lot of little white lies, not that anything that's going to hurt anyone and not with a malicious intent. It would just be, I always thought of it as social lubrication. Like, we'll just make the way easier because we're getting along and there's no differences or disagreements. And
but as you said earlier, it's like betraying yourself to a degree.
Exactly. It's like going against the truth of myself. Now, sometimes I didn't always know the truth, but sometimes I would know the truth and I would go against it just to make someone feel a little bit better about me.
So this is why now you say, I don't want to watch this movie, I don't want to watch that.
Right, or I'll say I actually didn't like that movie. And
Yeah.
let's talk about that. Let's talk about the fact that you liked it and I didn't. And let that be an interesting conversation. And, especially in the Enneagram world, I think I might express a strong opinion about something that I disagree with. And it's always a little scary because I don't want someone to have a negative view of me. But now I've gotten to the point where if they do, I can live with that.
Yeah. Okay. I like that. And what about the before and after inside you, like how you feel with yourself and with life?
Well, I think I'm a lot less anxious because I'm more rooted inside myself. I think before I was more anxious because how I felt about myself, or even my state of being inside myself, was totally influenced by everybody else, right? So if someone didn't like me or someone got mad at me, it was almost like my whole day was ruined, maybe my whole week. And like I couldn't stop thinking about it. Or I would go to a party and have a good time, and the next day I would wake up worrying about I said this or I said that, or I didn't talk to this person, or I said this in front of that person and maybe that was wrong. And so it would like I would constantly be in a state of worry and regret about not presenting myself in a way that everyone else was okay with. So that creates a lot of anxiety and worry, and it takes me out of my own experience. It takes me out of myself. Whereas now I would say I'm much more at ease because I'm more connected to my own emotions. If I start having an emotion, and I'm pretty emotional, as you know, I cry a lot. Just naturally. I know it used to be if I started crying when I was talking, I would feel really embarrassed and I would try to stop as much as possible, as quickly as possible. But now, if I feel a strong emotion while I'm talking, even in front of people, I just think, well, that's the truth. Mm-hmm. And it may be vulnerable, but I need to be me, like being more true to my emotions and how I feel inside and what I need.
And you manage to feel well with that.
Is much more important, and it feels like the right thing. And more importantly, I feel less anxious because I'm not trying to control myself excessively, and I'm not trying to control the outside world and other people. I'm just more going with the flow of things, and I'm allowing the truth of what wants to happen or what needs to happen, both inside myself and with others and in connection with others, to happen. And that's actually a huge relief, and it's very freeing, and it doesn't take as much emotional fortitude as I thought it would to deal with the consequences. It's like, okay, whatever happens, happens. If someone is not okay with me, I'll deal with that, and it won't be as difficult as I think I once thought it would be.
I appreciate your sharing so much and also learning more about you, my friend. So let's have another short break.
If you liked this podcast, visit www.cpenneagram.com for much more great Enneagram content.
Did you know you can study with Bea and Geranyu and work toward becoming a certified Chestnut Pies Enneagram professional? Join one of their workshops for professionals interested in integrating the Enneagram in skillful and effective ways to build your confidence applying the Enneagram as a tool to support your clients' growth and development. Learn how at www.cpenneagram.com.
Bea and Uranio teach in-person inner work retreats and professional workshops all over the world. They happen twice a year in California, London, Shanghai, Sao Paulo, and Cairo, and sometimes in other countries and U.S. locations too. Hundreds of students from all places and levels of knowledge have joined these courses. You can see the full Chestnut Pies Enneagram Academy calendar of events at www.cpenneagram.com.
Bea, now maybe we can focus a little bit on how people can relate better with you and perhaps with other twos, but let's keep talking about you. So what are things that you like, that you appreciate when people do with you in your new phase, as work in progress as a two, and what are things that you don't like?
I think I like it when people are honest with me, even if, obviously it's always nice to get positive feedback, but it's also good to get constructive critical feedback. Now, as a two, I am still sensitive, so try to say it in a way that's respectful and where you own your own responses, because I can easily take on board a little bit too much. Like if someone doesn't like something, I can immediately think, oh, I did something wrong. But the truth is that sometimes it's about that other person, so take responsibility for your side of it.
You mean the feedback itself?
The feedback itself.
It's about the other person, sometimes.
Sometimes it can be that person, that the thing I did was fine and they didn't like it for some reason that's more about them.
Let me chime in a bit. I've been learning with you that sometimes you will still react in a sensitive way, and I need to stay there and allow you to express those sensitive feelings, and they will go away.
Yes.
Sometimes amazingly very soon, at least for my mental pattern as a type 5. And I learned that a lot from you about that also. So I think, am I right to say that you have a need, and maybe other choose also do, to be respected in their feelings and listened to?
Yes, I think don't judge me for having emotions. See emotions as a good part of me and humanity in general. Even if you're not as emotional as me, sort of be open to hearing how I really feel and hearing my truth, and taking it in as valid, even if it's not the same as yours. I think, like you were, I think, implying, one of the things I appreciate about you is you will often stay connected to me, even if I'm in a strong emotion, or even if I'm feeling something you may not understand. Kind of hang in there with me. And a lot of times when I'm in a mood, what I've learned about myself, and maybe it'll be a negative mood, like maybe something set me off because I felt hurt about something. Sometimes I realize now that it's just that my emotions got triggered, and that I just need a little time to have the emotion and allow it to pass through, and my mood will change.
Okay.
And so it's not like I'm going to be in that state forever. And the more I'm just understood and seen and not judged in that place, the faster I can move out of that feeling. Again, not that there was anything wrong with the feeling. It was more that it came, and I don't necessarily need to hold on to it. I can have the feeling and it can pass, and I can be in a different place. And I need to allow that. And it also helps me if other people allow that.
Yeah, and in all this case, I had to own the fact that I was not respecting as much your emotional display and reactivity, because I'm fearful of displaying my own emotions.
Right.
So it's all about owning our parts in relationships. But now I want to ask you for a feedback for me.
Okay.
I've been trying to push you to ask for help
Yes.
a few times. Am I doing it right?
Yes. I mean, you've actually helped me a lot in that, because it's so funny. I know that asking for help is important, and sometimes I think I'm asking for help and I'm actually not. It's like I accentuate the distress I'm in, like almost thinking you're going to come to my aid if I freak out a little bit. And I like actually that what you'll say, you see me sort of being in distress and freaking out a little bit. And
Give us an example.
I'm trying to think of, like, it could be even just something about doing a PowerPoint presentation or something with my computer, and I'm not very good technically. And so I'll get frustrated that something's not working or I can't make it work. And I'll just sort of have a little bit of
Tantrum.
Well, maybe that might be a strong word.
Well, for fives, anything can be a tantrum.
Yes. So I might start getting upset and saying, "Oh,
yes.
this is hard." And I actually like that you often humorously push me to say, "Are you going to ask me for help?" Because it truly does not occur to me to verbalize it. And I think it can be so important to go from just sort of having a little freak out and hoping someone sees it and comes over and helps me, to actually having to verbalize it. So I like that you push me to say, "Do you need help? Are you going to ask me?" Because it reminds me, first of all, that I don't do that, even when I think I am, because I'm being indirect.
And when you still don't ask for help, is it okay that I ask that second or third time?
Yes. I think of you as a very good friend on the inner development path. And I think you're doing me a service when you don't help unless I ask for it. So I think actually, and that's a really good thing that you do to help me, even though in the moment I get frustrated with you. I always know you're doing the right thing for my own inner growth.
Not always.
Well,
but
for my growth, it is. I mean, not all. You're not always doing the right thing in everything, but in that respect, pushing me to ask for help is a supportive thing.
So as a 2 on a growth path, B, what would be all the things you expect from others but don't tell them?
Well, I think It's hard for me to think of more things, but I would say coming closer to me and knowing that, understanding about me that I might be a little uncomfortable with that, even though it's the thing I want the most. So knowing that if I display or express some fear, or if I even move away a little bit, that it's just very vulnerable to be really close to people. But don't give up on me, don't take any kind of sign of me withdrawing as the final answer.
So what should I do when that happens? Is it just staying around, or would it be too much to say, oh, it's okay to not know or to be in a doubt? Or would that be too much to say?
I think you can stay around is definitely true. I think maybe giving me a little bit of positive feedback, or making a supportive comment, or saying it's okay not to know, I think that's also really good. Sometimes I'm not always sure that what I'm feeling or doing will be okay with the other person.
So I can say more that I'm okay with that and take your time.
Yes, reassurance
And
that if you're feeling,
and I
uncomfortable, it's okay.
I appreciate that you are in your process.
Yes.
And that's, of course, a big blind spot for me, because I don't feel like needing that appreciation
Right.
from others
As a 5.
and then I don't do it.
Yeah.
And I'm trying though, but I know I have a way to go. Some other I need to do more. So what is it that we haven't talked about that you think might be important for you, for our listener here, to understand more about choose? Who are on a path.
Who are on a path. Well, I think we've covered a lot of the most important things. I think being aware of pride is so key, and all its different manifestations. Owning how I can be controlling, how I can think I know better than other people, what's good for them. I think those are important things.
Are you controlling with me?
At times I am, but more and more I recognize the impulse to control, or like the desire to manipulate. But I stop myself.
That's also true. Yes.
And I feel good about that.
Do you think you're a little bit bossy with me at times?
Well, I think maybe you might need a good boss. So maybe that's an accurate.
So do you see that was too much?
And maybe I can be a little bit too bossy. And what I've really noticed, and this is a self-preservation too thing, when I'm bossy with you, at times it can be out of anxiety about wanting things to go well and needing to control every detail so that other people have a good experience of the work we're doing.
Yes. I take that in.
Yeah. And I need to work on my own anxiety and go with the flow more. And you've helped me a lot with that.
Okay. So now it's time for our top 5. Our top 5 today is top 5 qualities each of us here appreciate the most about choose, who are truly doing the work and self-developing.
Yes.
I feel like starting this time.
Okay.
So my number 5, what I really appreciate in you, it's only number 5 because I think it comes a little bit from my 5 ego. But still, I need to be honest, and I say that I appreciate. It's that I see that not only you, but other choose that I know become a little less invasive of my space.
Yeah.
And less invasive of other people's spaces.
Yes.
Like, not talking about me, but sometimes I see couples, and one of them is a Chew, and I see that they are invading the space of the other, even though the other is not complaining and using all that invasion and help.
Yes.
But it disturbs me because I see the control behind that.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's a really important thing, and I'm glad you named it, because the last thing I want to be is invasive, but I catch myself sometimes like wanting to know things that are none of my business. And a social too I know that I really like, she sometimes says, what you think of me is none of my business. And I love that saying. And it's like, when I was younger, I just wanted to know everything about everyone. And what I recognize is it's not my business. Like I shouldn't know everything about everyone, and I shouldn't be too focused on people and what they're doing if it doesn't have anything to do with me. And so I think that's a really good one.
Now,
it's a good
what I
reminder.
want to emphasize here is how nice it is to be with a Two on the path who's not that invasive.
Yeah. And I hope you don't experience me that way.
Yeah, you're doing a great job. So what is your number 5?
So my number 5 is the ability to set boundaries and say no. And I've worked with some twos and they'll say, what is a boundary? Like, how do you set the boundaries? And I know for me, it was a really important concept to learn. And of course, becoming a therapist really helped me with that. But I think the ability to say no to things, to set boundaries, to say, this is where I stop and you begin is very important. And I appreciate twos when they can do that.
Yeah, me too. My number 4 is silence and introspection. I like seeing that on twos because it's so true when they are showing that aspect of them. And it's like becoming more 5-ish, and 5s become more 2-ish when they are doing the work, right?
Yes.
As well as 4s become more 7-ish, 7s become more 4-ish. And maybe sometime we'll explain why this happens here on our Enneagram 2.0 podcast. But it's just very inspiring to me when I see twos who become more introspective.
Yeah. I totally understand what you mean. And certainly it's been good for me to be more introspective. Like meditation is so important for me. I really look forward to meditating, and sometimes it can't be long enough. So my number 4 is the ability to accept, feel, and express all emotions without any self-judgment. I often see twos...
your own emotions.
Your own emotions, right. And of course the emotions of others, but I think twos do that much more easily than with themselves. I often see twos, they'll start to have an emotion and they start apologizing. If they start crying, they start saying, sorry. And it's as if there's something wrong. When I love it when I love it when twos really have strong emotions and don't apologize for it. I also know that when I do typing interviews, I find some twos will say, I have feelings, but I'm kind of scared of them, or I don't feel comfortable with them, or I try not to have them. And twos repress emotions. That's the main defense mechanism. So I really...
Their own emotions mostly.
Their own emotions. And so I really appreciate it when twos have more self-acceptance around the fact that they're emotional. And if they have emotions, their emotions are important. They're bringing information, and they should be respected and experienced, and then eventually, of course, allowed to pass through. But I really appreciate twos who are fully in their emotions without judgment, without judging themselves.
Okay, so my number 3 is a beautiful balance of you and me. What do I mean by this? It's like when I see twos who are doing the work, they come to this equality of both you and me being as important. So being at the same level, each of us having our own needs, each of us having our own space to a degree, and having more of a balanced relationship. I find that very pleasant. I feel honored when I'm in front of a two doing that.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I think that's a really good one. So thank you for that. For me, my number 3 is the ability to know and express your own needs is a 2. And this goes a little bit to what you just said, because what it leads to is a balance of focusing on others and yourself. So other people have needs, but so do I. And that really it's about paying a lot of attention to my own needs and not paying more attention than is reasonable to other people's needs. So balancing out that focus by putting my own needs in the picture as a 2.
Thank you. My number 2 is what I see in Choose doing the work, that they look true to me, like being really
Authentic.
Authentic. And yeah, thank you. It's like being true to themselves, being true to what they say to me, being true to what's happening, so that is, to me, overcoming the fixation of flattery. And so when Choose are non-flattering, it's really inspiring, and they are serious in a good way at that point, and they're just authentic.
Yes.
If they are happy with something, they are happy. If they aren't, they are not smiling.
Yes.
So I like that.
Yes. Yeah, me too.
And I remember you saying that after doing your work, one of the things that disturb you the most is when people come to you and say, smile more.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, it's weird. Sometimes when you're walking around the world, you'll run into a random person who just says smile. And that has always really bothered me. And I think it's because earlier in my life, I was smiling too much in a false way. And so now I want to be in tune with what I'm feeling. And I really don't want anyone else to tell me to be happy when I may not be.
Yes. And what is your number 2?
My number 2 is the ability to be open to really receive, and especially to receive love, compliments, to really take others in the way that they offer themselves, or in the things they offer us. I think sometimes 2s stay out of balance unnecessarily and unintentionally, because it's really hard to take what the good stuff other people want to give us in. It's like we're trying to make everyone respond well and have good feelings about us, but when they do, we can't take it in. And so it's like a lot of effort goes out to impacting others positively, but then we can't appreciate the results. We don't get to enjoy or embrace our own positive impact.
Yeah, that's great. My number 1 is humility. I wonder if yours is also, but to me it's so inspiring. When I see an evolved one, I see them being more humble than I am.
And evolved too.
Yeah. So when you really witness a Choose humility, and that's rare because most Choose are not in touch with that, you see someone who gets to that understanding that we are no one, that we are not owners of the truth, that we don't know everything, and that we are very fragile as human beings and we need help.
Yes. Well, you won't be surprised to know that my number 1 is the same as your number 1. It's humility. I just know, and I can think of several 2s right now, 2s that were just at our inner work retreat, 2s that I know that are on the path of self-development, who are quite humble. And it's just a joy to know them. Because they retain all the really positive qualities of 2s, of being outgoing and fun and friendly and warm. But there's this groundedness, this sense of not needing to be important, this sense of being able to be vulnerable in a true way that I find incredibly inspiring. Now, I will say, connected to humility, I think, is also an awareness of what pride really is. And this is challenging. So I don't want 2s to be hard on themselves if they haven't mastered their pride yet, because this is really challenging. But I really admire 2s who are humble and fully aware of all the different ways pride manifests, like in not having needs, in feeling like they have to be superhuman to be loved, in being a bit controlling and thinking better what other people want, in manipulating. And we didn't talk about too much about manipulating, but it's simply the tendency to try to control events behind the scenes so you don't have to ask for what you want directly. And so I think what we sometimes do in our retreats is not make the 2 bad, but make pride the issue. In other words, pride made you do this, or pride has this influence. And I think when we can really see pride for what it is, the natural result is humility. And when you see a humble two who really can talk with a lot of genuine truth about the role pride plays and the way they see it, you can't help but see this beautiful sense of humility in them.
Yes, so beautiful. Now, you said something that inspires me to build on that. I suggest that you, who are listening to us, if you are a two, that you truly don't judge yourself for still not being there in all the things we've said here. And watch out for what we might call self-development pride, which is, I need to self-development quickly then. And, it's a process. Just rest assured that if you do your work, you will be heading towards all this. But don't rush, don't judge yourself for not being able to display all that we've said. And if you are talking about a two in your life, avoid just pushing this podcast onto them in a way that you need to listen to this because you'll be better. Truths are extra sensitive if you do that. You might want to say something like, oh, I listened to something, I found it interesting. And then you might want to listen to this, but don't push.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, because sometimes, let's face it, if you have a two in your life, sometimes twos can be hard to deal with because they don't see the pride. And again, all of us can have a difficult time seeing ourselves clearly. And with twos, it's important to be gentle, it's important to be loving, and it's important not to expect them to be where they aren't yet. And of course, if you are a two, being just wherever you are on your path is an act of humility, and accepting that and knowing that we're all a work in progress.
B, thank you so much for bringing all of you to this conversation. And thank you for being my friend.
Thank you for being my friend, and thank you for being interested in learning about me as a two.
So this has been the Enneagram 2.0 podcast. I am Uranio Pais.
And I'm Beatrice Chestnut.
Join us again next time as we talk about all things Enneagram.
Please click on like to help spread the word about our podcast.